The night Ethan Kane told me I was off limits, I was 17 years old, standing in his kitchen with cherry popsicle juice dripping down my chin, and I laughed like it was the funniest thing I'd ever heard. But he wasn't laughing. He was 23 then, home from college for the summer, and he looked at me with those storm gray eyes that made my stomach flip in ways I didn't understand yet. He said it quietly, almost like a warning. "You're Mara's little friend, Lila. You're off limits. Always will be." I didn't know then that those words would haunt me for the next 6 years. I didn't know that one day I'd break every rule we never spoke about. And I definitely didn't know that the night I needed him most would be the night everything between us shattered and rebuilt itself into something we could never take back. Let me back up. My name is Lila Cross, and I've known Mara Kane since we were 7 years old. She was the girl who shared her lunch with me on my first day of school when I forgot mine. The girl who held my hand through my parents' divorce. The girl who became more than a friend. She became my sister. And Ethan? Ethan was the older brother who existed in this unreachable, untouchable space. 6 years older than us. Tall, brooding, with dark hair that always looked like he'd just run his hands through it, and a jawline that could cut glass. He was the guy who'd ruffle Mara's hair when he passed through a room, who'd nod at me with this distant politeness, like I was part of the furniture. I didn't exist to him. Not really. Not until that summer when I was 17. That was the summer everything shifted. I'd grown up, filled out in ways that made me feel self-conscious and powerful at the same time. I'd stopped wearing my hair in braids and started wearing it down, long and dark and wavy. I'd stopped hiding behind baggy t-shirts. And Ethan noticed. I caught him looking at me once, just once, across the dinner table at the Kane house. It was a Sunday night, and Mara's mom had made her famous lasagna. I was laughing at something Mara's dad said, and when I glanced up, Ethan was staring at me with this expression I couldn't read. Intense. Almost pained. Then he looked away, jaw tight, and didn't look at me again for the rest of the night. That's when he cornered me in the kitchen later, when everyone else was in the living room watching a movie. That's when he said those words. "You're off limits, Lila. Always will be." I tried to play it off, tried to laugh, but there was something in his voice, something final, that made my chest ache in a way I didn't have words for yet. He walked away before I could respond. And for the next 6 years, we played this careful game of pretending the other didn't exist. Fast forward to now. I'm 23, and my life is a beautiful disaster. I graduated college with a degree in journalism, moved to the city, and landed a job at a small online magazine that pays just enough to cover my shoebox apartment and my coffee addiction. Mara's still my best friend. She lives 2 blocks away, works in marketing, and we still have wine nights every Thursday like clockwork. Ethan? Ethan became everything everyone always knew he would. He took over his father's architecture firm at 26 and turned it into one of the most sought-after companies in the state. He's successful, intimidating, and still has that same brooding energy that makes people either want to impress him or avoid him entirely. We run in the same circles now. Mara makes sure of it. Family dinners, birthdays, holidays. And every single time Ethan and I do this dance, we're polite, distant. We make small talk that feels like walking on glass. "How's work, Lila?" "Good." "You?" "Busy." And that's it. That's all we give each other. Except sometimes, late at night when I'm alone in my apartment, I think about that summer. I think about the way he looked at me. I think about the way his voice sounded when he said I was off limits, like it physically hurt him to say it. And I wonder if he ever thinks about me too. The night everything changed started like any other Thursday. Mara and I were at our favorite wine bar, splitting a bottle of rose and talking about her disaster of a date from the weekend. She was mid-rant about a guy who'd spent the entire dinner talking about his cryptocurrency portfolio when my phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. "Unknown. We need to talk. It's about your article." My stomach dropped. 2 weeks ago, I'd published an investigative piece about a local real estate development company that was displacing low-income families to build luxury condos. It was the biggest story I'd ever written, and it had gotten a lot of attention, most of it positive, but some of it not. I'd gotten a few angry emails. A couple of threatening voicemails that my editor had reported to the police. Nothing serious, they said. Just people blowing off steam. But this text felt different. You okay? Mara asked, noticing my face. Yeah, just work stuff. I lied, shoving my phone back in my pocket. We finished our wine, hugged goodbye on the sidewalk, and I walked the 3 blocks to my apartment. It was late, almost 11, and the streets were quieter than usual. The air had that heavy, humid quality that comes before a storm. I was half a block from my building when I heard footsteps behind me. At first, I told myself it was nothing. Just someone else walking home. But the footsteps matched my pace. Sped up when I sped up. Slowed down when I slowed down. My heart started to race. I pulled out my phone, pretended to make a call, and turned the corner toward my building. The footsteps followed. I was 10 feet from my door when a hand grabbed my arm. I screamed. Shut up, a voice hissed. Male. Rough. Shut up, or this gets worse. I tried to pull away, but his grip was iron. He shoved me against the wall, and I felt something cold and sharp press against my ribs. A knife. You wrote that article, he said. You cost people a lot of money. You think you can just ruin lives and walk away. My mind went blank with terror. I couldn't breathe. Couldn't think. And then, God, I don't even know why I did it. I whispered the only name that came to mind. Ethan. It wasn't a plan. It wasn't even conscious. It was just instinct. The guy laughed. Who the hell is Ethan? I don't remember dialing. I don't remember how my shaking fingers managed to pull up his contact and hit call. But suddenly, my phone was ringing, and the guy was cursing, and the knife was pressing harder. Drop the phone. Lila. Ethan's voice came through the speaker, deep and confused and so steady. Ethan, I choked out. I need. Where are you? His voice changed instantly. Sharp. Urgent. Lila, where are you? Outside my building, The guy ripped the phone from my hand and threw it against the pavement. It shattered. But it was too late. Because Ethan had heard. What happened next felt like a blur. The guy started dragging me toward the alley beside my building, and I fought. God, I fought, but he was so much stronger. I was screaming, kicking, clawing, and then a car screeched to a halt at the curb. Ethan exploded out of the driver's seat like a force of nature. I'd never seen him like that. Ever. His face was a mask of fury, his eyes blazing, and he moved so fast the guy didn't even have time to react before Ethan's fist connected with his jaw. The knife clattered to the ground. The guy stumbled back, dazed, and Ethan hit him again. And again. He didn't stop until the guy was on the ground, groaning, and even then, Ethan looked like he wanted to keep going. Ethan, I whispered. He froze. Slowly, he turned to look at me, and the fury in his eyes melted into something else. Something raw and terrified, and so intense it made my knees weak. Lila. My name came out like a prayer. And then I was in his arms. I don't know who moved first. Maybe both of us. But suddenly, I was pressed against his chest, and he was holding me so tightly I couldn't breathe, and I didn't care. I buried my face in his shirt and shook, and he held me like I was the only thing keeping him grounded. I've got you, he murmured into my hair. I've got you. You're safe. In the distance, I heard sirens. Someone must have called the police. But I couldn't focus on that. All I could focus on was Ethan, the way he smelled like cedar and rain, the way his heart was pounding against my cheek, the way his hands were trembling as he held me. How did you get here so fast? I whispered. I was already on my way. His voice was tight. You called, and I didn't even think. I just drove. You were 20 minutes away. I drove fast. The police arrived. They took statements, arrested the guy, and made sure I was okay. Ethan didn't leave my side the entire time. He stood next to me, close enough that our shoulders brushed, and every time I started to shake, his hand would find mine and squeeze. By the time they left, it was past midnight, and I was exhausted. Ethan walked me up to my apartment, and I unlocked the door with shaking hands. You shouldn't be alone tonight, he said quietly. I turned to look at him. He was standing in the doorway, backlit by the hallway light, and he looked wrecked. His knuckles were bruised and bleeding. His shirt was wrinkled. His hair was a mess. And he was looking at me like I was something precious. "Stay," I whispered. He hesitated. "Lila, please." Something in my voice broke him. He stepped inside and closed the door behind him. We didn't talk much that night. I made tea because I didn't know what else to do, and Ethan sat at my tiny kitchen table and watched me with those storm gray eyes. I brought him a first aid kit, and he let me clean the cuts on his knuckles without protest. "You didn't have to do that," I said softly, dabbing antiseptic on a particularly deep cut. "You could have just called the police." "He had a knife on you, Lila." His voice was low, rough. I wasn't going to stand there and wait. I looked up at him, and the intensity in his gaze made my breath catch. "Why did you call me?" he asked. "I don't know," I admitted. You were the first person I thought of." Something flickered in his eyes.
"Pain, maybe.
Or longing." "You're Mara's best friend," he said, like he was reminding himself. "You're off limits," I finished. "I know. You told me that 6 years ago." And I meant it. "Why?" The question hung between us, heavy and dangerous. Ethan leaned back in his chair, running a hand through his hair. "Because you were 17, Lila. Because you were my little sister's best friend. Because every time I looked at you, I knew I was crossing a line I shouldn't even be thinking about." My heart stopped. "And now?" I whispered. He looked at me for a long, agonizing moment. "Now you're 23, he said quietly. "And I still can't stop thinking about you." The air between us crackled. I should have said something. Should have pulled back, laughed it off, reminded him of all the reasons this was a bad idea. But I didn't. Instead, I leaned forward, and he met me halfway. The kiss was soft at first. Tentative. Like we were both testing the waters, waiting for the other to pull away. But then his hand came up to cup my face, and I melted into him, and the kiss deepened into something desperate and hungry and 6 years in the making. When we finally broke apart, we were both breathing hard. "This is a bad idea," he murmured against my lips. "Probably. Mara's going to kill us." "Probably." He kissed me again, and this time there was no hesitation. I woke up the next morning tangled in my sheets with sunlight streaming through the window and the faint smell of cedar lingering on my pillow. Ethan was gone. I sat up, heart pounding, and looked around my room. His shoes were gone from by the door. His jacket was gone from the chair. He'd left. My chest ached in a way that felt too big for my body. I grabbed my phone. Miraculously, I'd had a backup in my apartment, and opened my messages. There was one from Ethan, sent an hour ago. "Ethan, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have stayed. I shouldn't have kissed you. This was a mistake." I stared at the words until they blurred.
A mistake.
That's all I was to him.
A mistake.
The next few weeks were hell. I threw myself into work, avoided Mara's questions about why I seemed distracted, and ignored the 17 texts Ethan sent me that I couldn't bring myself to open. I told myself I was fine. I told myself it didn't matter. I told myself I didn't lie awake every night replaying that kiss, wondering if it had meant anything to him at all. And then, 3 weeks later, Mara invited me to her parents' house for Sunday dinner. "Ethan will be there," she said casually. My stomach dropped. "I don't know if I can make it." "Lila." Mara's voice turned serious. "You've been weird for weeks. I don't know what's going on, but you're my best friend, and I miss you. Please come." I couldn't say no to her. So I went. The Kane house looked exactly the same as it always had.
Warm.
Welcoming. Filled with the smell of Mara's mom's cooking and the sound of laughter. Ethan was already there when I arrived. He was standing in the kitchen, talking to his dad, and when I walked in, his eyes found mine immediately. For a moment, the world stopped. Then Mara grabbed my arm and pulled me toward the living room, and the moment shattered. Dinner was agony. I sat across from Ethan, and every time I looked up, he was watching me. His jaw was tight. His knuckles were white around his fork. And I wanted to scream. After dinner, I escaped to the back porch for air. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, and I leaned against the railing and tried to breathe. Lila. I turned. Ethan was standing in the doorway, hands shoved in his pockets, looking like he hadn't slept in days. We need to talk, he said. I don't think we do. Lila. You said it was a mistake. I cut him off, my voice shaking. You left without saying goodbye, and you sent me a text calling it a mistake. What else is there to say? He stepped closer. I lied. My breath caught. I said it was a mistake because I was terrified. He continued, his voice rough. Because you're Mara's best friend, and I've spent 6 years trying to convince myself I don't feel the way I do about you. But that night, God, Lila, when you called me, and I heard the fear in your voice, I've never driven that fast in my life. And when I saw that guy with his hands on you, I wanted to kill him. Tears burned behind my eyes. I kissed you because I've wanted to for 6 years, he said, his voice breaking. And I left because I didn't know how to tell you that without ruining everything. I stared at him, my heart pounding so hard it hurt. You're not off limits anymore, Lila, he whispered. Not to me. Not if you don't want to be. I closed the distance between us in 2 steps and kissed him like my life depended on it. He kissed me back just as fiercely, his hands tangling in my hair, and this time, it didn't feel like a mistake. It felt like coming home. Of course, we had to tell Mara. That conversation happened 2 weeks later, over brunch, and it went about as well as you'd expect. Mara stared at us in silence for a full 30 seconds. Then she said, I knew it. Ethan and I exchanged a glance. You knew? I asked. Lila, you've been in love with my brother since you were 17. And Ethan's been brooding over you for just as long. I'm not blind. She pointed her fork at us. But if you two ever break up and make things weird, I'm disowning both of you. We promised we wouldn't. And we haven't.
It's been a year now.
Ethan and I are still figuring things out, navigating the weird space between being in love and being part of each other's families. But every morning, I wake up next to him, and he looks at me like I'm the best thing that ever happened to him. And I look at him the same way. Because the truth is, sometimes the person who's off limits is the person you're meant to find. Sometimes, the night you need someone most is the night everything changes. And sometimes, love is worth breaking the rules for. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more love stories that touch the soul. Let me know in the comments, have you ever fallen for someone you weren't supposed to? Drop your story below.